My name's Elijah and welcome to my podcast Songwriting for Songwriters. My special guest today is John Owen Williams. John is a songwriter and a producer. He's also managed bands, worked in A&R, run record labels, produced albums for the Housemartins and the Proclaimers. He also signed and A&R'd Alison, Moyet, Simple Minds, Robert Plant, Petula Clark, James Taylor Quartet, Charlotte Church, Cathy Dennis, Thea Gilmore, Michael Nyman, Steve Winwood, All and Oates, Fun Lovin' Criminals, Talk Talk, Status Quo, many acts. He also worked as a music journalist and has started his own recording career at Rap Records in the late 70s. So John speaks to me about his new act, the John Williams Syndicate, about working for record labels and A&R, what A&R people are looking for. He gives very strong advice to songwriters about developing your own voice and artistry. So I think this is going to be a really interesting podcast for you to listen to. Please subscribe and check out John's work. The links are at the end. And thank you for listening to the podcast. Joining me today on my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters, is John Owen Williams. John, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks, Elijah. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. You look like you've got a very nice building you're in there with some lovely guitars. Is that your studio?
It's my studio, which is at the bottom of my London garden.
Fabulous.
It's a shed which is 10 foot by 12 foot with a vaulted ceiling.
Nice.
I've recorded 2 Petula Clark albums in here.
Wow.
1 Claudia Brücken album and 2 solo albums for myself.
Fantastic. So it's got a bit of history and a bit of form, that place then.
Yeah, it's got daylight in it, which I think is really, really great in the studio.
Good point.
And I've recorded in lots of great studios throughout my career, and the one thing which they all have in common is great microphones, great preamps, great compressors, and great EQs. So I've got a vocal chain with all that good gear, and it's Neumann mics, and the rest I just play in or MIDI in.
Right. Okay. Interesting though. You just to get a bit esoteric for a second, the idea of daylight is actually quite an important thing because most studios have they're bunkers, aren't they? The doors are shut. There's a lot of dark, sort of ethnic colours in there, and it's all kind of lovely. But actually, you make a good point about how important light is actually for the kind of creative as well. So did you find that daylight has changed the way that you work at all?
Well, you feel more awake when it's daylight. So, for example, I produced the last 5 Paul Heaton and Jacqui Abbott albums.
Wow.
And the last 2 have been made at Blueprint in Salford, Manchester. Yeah. And it's a fantastic studio, but the control room is in the dark. And as soon as you walk in, it's turn the lights on and try and get the light level right. So it just affects your mood. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you've had an amazing career in music. I've been doing a little bit of research, and not only you're a great songwriter yourself, but you produced, you worked in A&R, you worked in management. Just start us off. How did you fall in love with music? What was the what was that moment like for you?
Oh, I think it was when I first heard the opening riff to "You Really Got Me" by the Kinks. That made me really just think that there was something different to other than I was playing Kingston Trio kind of folk songs. And I returned to school. I went to school at a place called Bromsgrove in Worcestershire. And I was in the school band below the school band. The school band played in front of the school every Saturday night before the school film. And we would perform the hits of the week. So we would rehearse in the cellar under the school hall and learn Small Faces, Kinks, Who, Beach Boys, just whatever is in the charts. And we'd do our version of it and then play it when the school band above us left eventually. John Ilsley was in the band, by the way, the bass player from Dire Straits. And they were great players. And so we just copied their set and we learned all the Chuck Berry songs, all the Too Much Monkey Business, Johnny Be Good, and all the classic R&B stuff. So I played guitar from an early age.
Right.
And when I went to university in France and Canada, I took my 12 string with me, and I used to play coffee houses in Canada for every Sunday night for 4 years,
Wow.
and that's where I learned to play live, I guess. And I've not played live ever since.
Oh, really? Why did you change your mind about playing live? Just your career took a different route, or?
Well, I had I eventually got a recording deal with Mickey Most of Rack and made a single for him, which was Kid Jensen Record of the Week on Radio 1,
Oh.
and was all over the radio, but it wasn't a hit. And then we got dropped. And I just thought, well, that's that. And I spent my career after that assisting others and producing others and trying to realize what they wanted on record. And suddenly realized that producing records was, for me, an art form.
Yeah.
And so I got more interested in the actual creation of records.
Yeah.
And but the playing live is a different. I'm not that insecure, I don't think.
That's a very good point, actually. It's can be quite a manic head state to be a performer. I had an incident last weekend, actually, myself. I was playing a festival, and 10 minutes before, the anxiety spiral was fairly kind of intense, wondering why I'm even doing it. And then 2 minutes later on stage, everything's relaxed and cool. But it's quite an emotional roller coaster to ride those waves. So that's quite an interesting point there. So you found your security, or not your security, you found love of producing records. And I think you're right, it is an art form. So what was the kind of jump from, who was the first person you produced?
Well, the first person I produced was a guy called Bogdan Komanovsky, who lived in the ground floor flat of the flat I was living in London in 1979. And he played Elvis in the stage show and Jesus Christ in Jesus Christ Superstar and Hitler, the War Rumors. And he was playing all three people at once. But in Elvis, he went down a storm. And so there were three Elvises: Shaking Stevens, Bogdan Komnowski, and some other guy. And I picked the wrong one because Shaking Stevens was the one who had the hits. But we did a version of Roy Orbison's Blue Angel, which I've got on my jukebox. And so that was the first record I produced. And the second record I produced was my East Side Band record on Rack Records.
Wow. Okay.
And we recorded an album's worth of material, which is coming out on Warner's in the 1st of September.
Fantastic.
So, which I'm very pleased about.
So even though you were doing you were producing others, were you still writing songs throughout as well?
I kind of had stopped writing songs for a long time in the 80s when I was producing the Housemartins and the Proclaimers and being head of A&R at Polydor, and just took on another aspect of the business.
Yeah.
And I returned to songwriting 15, 20 years ago when I had satisfied a lot of my artistic dreams of being head of A&R at major labels. I ran Chrysalis, Sanctuary, and Polydor, and was an A&R man for about 15, 20 years. And that's an art form in itself. And it's a real kind of, I really enjoyed it. And but in my last quartile of the process in the business, I decided to build this shed and get writing again. So I just turn up every day, and turning up is half the battle.
Yeah, you're right about that. I have to say the album Into the Light is fantastic. This by your it's your collaborative, isn't it? It's John Williams Syndicate. And it's a great sounding record.
Thank you.
Production or sound, but the songs are really good, interesting songs and commercial, but the sound, all of that stuff with this, it reminded me a bit of the Brian Jonestown Massacre a little bit, and for some reason some shoegaze, at times My Bloody Valentine, but also with a Velvet Underground thing. It was really, really an interesting listen, and great writing. So people that are listening to this, go and check it out, Into the Light, John Williams Syndicate, because it's a very, very good record.
Thank you. It's the follow-up to the first one, which is called Out of Darkness. and that there is a linking theme. But all the songs are about just different aspects of love.
Yeah.
And what I tried to do with the album was make a half-hour radio program where you never quite understand what's going to come next. Every song has a different chassis to it.
That's what I liked.
And it took a lot of thinking about the running order. So it's I'm now preparing volume 3 at the moment.
Good for you. It's really fresh and sounding great. So let me talk to you about A&R, because I think a lot of people that are trying to make it as songwriters or in bands, you know, it's a bit of a mysterious world, that A&R kind of world, to the songwriter or artist from the outside. Like, why do some people get signed? Is it luck? Is it determination? Is it that they're just better than other people? Is it the you know, many things? Is it money? Is it nepotism? What do you think is what's the perspective of the A&R man? You know, what do you see and hear in a writer or a band that plucks your interest? I know you've obviously, it's different for different people, but what is it that you were looking for when you were A&Ring?
When I was, I guess the role of the A&R man has changed over the years, and the A&R man originally was the A&R man who, in a 3-hour session, could take the act he was interested in into the studio, and with the help of an arranger and an engineer, produce a record. And so Tony Hatch, Mickey Most, George Martin, Chris Blackwell, all these guys had the ability to take an act into a studio and make a record. So that was something I wanted to learn how to do, and I produced Radio 1 live sessions for years, which taught me how to record quickly. And what I was looking for in an artist was someone who knew exactly what he wanted to sound like. Or someone who knew where he wanted to be, who he wanted and who he was, and also had a unique perspective on things, and also had a unique voice. So sometimes you come across artists who are really good singers, really good players, but just don't have that je ne sais quoi, that certain something which is unique. And you can make the best record in the world, but unless you can say, "Oh, that's that singer," as soon as you hear the song, you're in difficulty. So I signed the Proclaimers, and you know they are recognizable as soon as you hear them.
Yeah.
And Alison, Moyet, Jim Kerr, the Simple Minds, so many great artists, and great artists. All they need is someone to steer them and just help and aid and abet and make them feel comfortable and help them realize their dreams. So it's a many-faceted job, but mainly it's listening. It's listening to what people say.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the difficulties I had working in major corporations was that I was on the side of the artist, which is difficulty for the corporation, because they're there to make money, and they're dealing with artists who have emotion. It's a fast-moving consumer goods business, but it deals with people's emotions and lives.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky thing to get the balance right.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting that, and well done for being on the side of the artist for a start. It's interesting what you were saying about a recognizable voice. I think that's very true. Do you think that's something which is really important to have? Like, if someone you hear that person, you know who it is. Is that like a very important thing?
Yeah, I think it. For me, it is.
Yeah.
Definitely. I made some records with some great singers who just didn't have that certain something, and you just end up with a bland record. And I'm not interested in going to the studio just for the sake of going in the studio. It has to be. So I work with an artist called Claudia Brucken.
Great voice.
Who's got an amazing voice, and she could sing a telephone directory and it would sound fascinating.
Yeah.
And you know, Alison Moyet, she's a great singer. Petula Clark. So I just try and surround myself with great people and let the magic occur, and then try and if I've written the song for them or with them, I'm very particular about how they sing it, because it's very easy for them to go off piste, but the way I want my songs sung is a very particular way, and it's the phrasing is all important, and
Yeah.
my phrasing borrows a lot from Nick Drake's phrasing.
Yeah.
And which is not quite so obvious or on the beat as you may anticipate.
Good point. It isn't actually. It's quite a lot more free, isn't it? In a certain way, he has his own thing going on. So do you think, like, when you said earlier that the job of your job as A&R and probably as a producer is to assist talent. What's that like for you as a producer when you hear a great song someone else has written? Do you have a sort of instinct for where it should go, what it should sound like, and what's that kind of collaboration like? Are you given the free? Do you sort of take that on as your mission, or is it very collaborative with the artist?
Well, when I'm producing Paul Heaton, for example, he has a very clear vision about how he wants the end record to sound. And my job is really captain of the ship, trying to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
And to make that happen, you have to inhabit the song. You have to really live it. And so when I get immersed in someone else's record, I just dive in, and everything else goes out the window because you're in their world 24/7, and you have to be if you want to understand the nuances of a song and how, is it the right key, is it the right tempo, is it the right balance of instruments? There's so many different questions that need constantly asking, and keeping the ship afloat. Keeping it buoyant, keeping it exciting place to be and a fun place to be, and that's the key to it. Is having a laugh. This world is. You've got to have your glass half full, otherwise you're batting on a sticky wicket.
Do you ever have occasions where that can go? A record can be going the wrong way, or sort of coming off the track. So, do you have tips for like bringing it back online?
Well, I would say if you're having problems with a track, start again, because generally good records have cohesive arrangements and almost mix themselves. The hit records I've made, you can mix them in 2 or 3 hours.
Right.
And it's the ones that's assuming you've been mixing along the way and you're working on a DAW system.
Yeah.
But good hit songs just have things that happen in an order. Mickey Mouse said to me once, when I was a fledgling artist for him, that the human ear only hears one thing at a time. So you hear the snare drum, you hear the string riff, or the bass riff, then the vocal, then something else, then the tambourine. But you don't hear the tambourine and the bass guitar and the string riff individually all at once. They all happen in their own space. So creating space in a record or in a song is all important. The writing a song is a tricky thing.
Tell me about writing a song for you. What's the process for you? How does it start?
Well, first of all, I identify what I call is the nut.
Okay.
And the nut is that. So, for example, if you were telling a story about hunter-gatherers around a campfire, any fool could say the woolly mammoth attacked us and we were all dead. But the first one to say it was a dark and stormy evening and the weather was, the beast towered above us. Suddenly you've got people's interest. So it's a matter of, so that's one thing is creating an atmosphere.
Yeah. And
sometimes the opening line can do that.
Yeah.
So you've got to invite people into the nut. And the nut is what the song is really about.
Okay.
And it's so many songs are not considered or written properly.
Okay.
Well, non-hit songs are, because they're just made up platitudes.
Yeah.
And the nut is the resolution of the struggle.
That's a really interesting point to talk about songwriting, actually, because even if you're not singing platitudes, there is the nut in the song. And so even if it's just the key line in the chorus, it's like there is a heart of the song, isn't it? There's a point where the song has to say something, which is the point and reason for the song,
The point you're trying to make, which, yes.
And you make a good point there that actually has to be quite, that it's obvious really, but it needs to be focused on. So you can lead up to it in a poetic way or an abstract way, or you can use realism or tell it like a story or narrative, but you've got to get that a song has to have a nut, a meaning.
So that's pretty important. The Jimmy Webb is an artist I signed to Sanctuary.
Wow.
Twilight of the Renegades album a while back, and he became a pretty good friend. A lot of the great artists are very, very friendly, and good people. And Jimmy Webb's one of the greats, and he's got a great book on songwriting. But I often revert to a lot of his tips for writing a song, which is have a legal one of those yellow notepads, those legal notepads, and the pencil with a rubber on it. And so you have that, and a thesaurus, and a rhyming dictionary, and then I'll turn up, and there are three ways. I mean, he talks about 9 different songs that exist, but I mean, you can see, I take the first 3, which are: number 1, people, places, or events in our memory that make us happy, sad, or angry. So you're talking about the past. So last night when we were young. So you're putting yourself into the past. I often, when I'm writing a song, put myself into a situation. A situation perhaps I know something about, and then ask these 3 questions. And the second one is people, place, or events that are affecting us in the present time by the same criteria. So a great song for that is "You've Lost That Loving Feeling."
Yeah,
that's the present. That's what's happened. That love is gone.
Yeah.
And thirdly, people, places, or events that are likely to appear in the future by the same criteria. Any day now, Burt Bacharach.
Yeah.
So and then suddenly you've got 3 scenarios where you can jump in, and my Into the Light album is full of. It's just that. It's the observation of love in its different forms.
How wonderful. Amazing. That's a really good piece of advice to share, actually. But do you believe in the muse? Like I often find when I talk to songwriters in these podcasts, there's a lot of great advice, technical exercises, things to think about. And then there's also like a kind of other thing that happens, and it's sort of spontaneous and it just happens. What's your relationship with that kind of aspect of creativity? Do you believe in that? Is that a thing that works with you?
Yeah, I often just sit and jump into the magic.
Yeah.
You don't know what's in there, but I'm a sort of guitarist of a certain ability. I never really upped my game much. It's upped a bit more recently because I'm playing a lot more. But you just strum and you sing, and suddenly you come across a chord progression which is, oh, that's nice to play, and then that's nice to sing over it. Oh, that's and that links to that song I was writing last week, and it's the same song where you come at it at a different angle.
Yeah.
And it's just half it is turning up.
Yeah.
But talking about music is like dancing about architecture. You know, it's something you just have to jump in. And actually, the people who sometimes are more fluent are the ones who aren't such great players, because they're not obsessed with the 7th and the 9th and the 13th and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And all the great songs are 3 card tricks, 3 chord tricks.
What advice do you think? Because you've been a producer and A&R manager at Songwriter. So someone now trying to break it into the music industry, because there's lots of songwriters that listen to this that are obviously hoping to have a hit or further their career in some way or form. What advice would you give from all the experience you've had in the industry to a writer today? Because I know the industry's changed, but what do they need to know and become aware of?
Well, I think you've got to learn how to work Logic or Pro Tools or Ableton, or I think that you've got to have the tools of your trade at your disposal.
Yeah,
because the great producers and songwriters know how to work it.
Yeah.
So I would, if you're serious about it, get serious about the craft and the surrounding parts of it, and take some guitar lessons. It's contrary to what I was saying a few minutes ago, but get good on your instrument. Take singing lessons. Just make sure that if you want to compete in this arena, that your presentation of material is spot on, because we only have so much time to listen to stuff, and if you can grab someone's attention from the get-go, then half the battle is over.
Yeah, good advice. Is it tough to get heard by people? I mean, I know you're talking from a few years ago, but you hear these stories and books about tapes in black bin liners that never going to get listened to, and obviously it's changed because it's emails and links. But did you find that people would listen? A&R people?
I think it's the problem today is that the overpopulation of material is what stops people. So for example, I'm trying to get syncs on the ex-Propaganda album I wrote with Claudia Brooken and Stephen Lipson last year, and it was a top 10 album. But if you try and get people to listen to it,
yeah,
for syncs, almost impossible, because there's so much material out there.
Yeah.
And if you consider, is it 30,000 songs are uploaded to Spotify every day?
Yeah.
Then it's tough. So you have to rely on good luck and fortune and knowing people, and so you just have to keep at it.
Yeah.
Never give up.
Never go up. That is some good advice there. So tell me the story then behind the John Williams Collective. What's you obviously said that you started to write 15 years ago, but as I said, it's what I really love about the album is this feels very together, but you get these different voices and there's some different writers there. So this, as well as you being the main writer, but what was the thinking behind that? Tell us how that came together.
Well, it came together. The first record came together during lockdown 3 years ago. I just returned to London after being in Manchester for 6 months producing Paul Heaton and Jacqui Abbott, and I started writing and recording myself in the studio, just seeing what it'd be like to present songs to other people. And then a few people heard and said, well, you should do them yourself. So I needed no encouragement, because I was quite keen to do that, but needed the backup of saying, yeah, go do it.
Yeah.
And I then thought, well, no one is going to know who the hell I am. So if I can get Petula Clark singing one of my songs and Claudia Brooken, and just get a few noted names, that might open up the project, because you've got to launch it in somehow. There's got to be a story around it. And so the second album I did because I got great critical response on the first one and sold a few CDs, and I'm now right in the zone and doing it on a daily basis.
Great.
And the John Williams Syndicate is called that because I can't call myself John Williams because of the other more famous ones, and John Owen Williams just sounded a bit like, I don't know, a bit odd. And so my publisher suggested the John Williams Syndicate, and I thought, yeah, that will do.
Excellent. So you've had a long relationship working with Paul Heaton and Jacqui Abbott. I think, did you say you produced the last 5 albums? I think. what's it like to have? Because I think it's really interesting when you get a producer who works with an artist over time, because it's a key relationship, I think, in the music industry, one of those ongoing relationships. So tell me about what you love about them as writers and performers, and what your role in that relationship, production-wise, is like.
Well, I first came across Paul Heaton when I produced both the Housemartins albums
Right.
in the 80s, and I came and I thought what a great writer he was then.
Yeah.
And of course, he's become one of Britain's major forces over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So it's just a joy to be involved with a hit act, and my role, I don't change a word, I don't change a note. I try to find out what's in his head and how he wants it to sound. Then we rehearsed for 2 months.
Wow.
The band rehearsed for 2 months, 10 to 5, 5 days a week.
Wow.
Assembling 28 songs.
Yeah.
Which we then pick in different keys, different tempos, and then try and work out who's going to sing the lead voice.
Okay.
Whether it's Paul or Jacqui. And that will the key will depend on who's the lead voice. And so we get to a stage where the band know each song backwards. Then we press go and we start recording, and the recording takes 3 months after that. So it's a 5-month project. It's a big, massive amount of work.
That's a really organic way. I mean, that's almost like what it was like when you started a band at school or something, because you just rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and get your show tight. And that's, I think these days there's a lot of recording, which is, like you said, we've all got Logic and everything else, and you can build it up from the bottom. But like, that's quite an organic way of working, isn't it?
And yes, it's a great way of working. Of course, it doesn't fit everybody because it's an expensive way of working as well. And,
sure.
And only a few artists can afford to do that. Luckily, he can afford to do it because he's still touring massive stadiums, and So it used to be you'd tour to support the record. Now you make the record to support the tour.
If you could produce any songwriter's album you haven't already worked with, who would you love to work with?
Oh, dead or alive?
Yeah, let's go dead or alive.
Well, Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, JJ Cale. I like, that is my natural bent of music. Jeff Lynne is my hero.
Is he?
Yeah, I just think the records he makes are pure genius.
They are, because he's also, from my point, he's obviously a big Beatles fan, to be fair, but his like arrangement and his the way the whole arrangement jigsaws together, he is an absolute master. So
if you listen to my records and then think about Jeff Lynne, then you can see who I'm not copying, but I take many tips out of his book.
Well, good. I mean, he's someone to study. You said some really important things, I think, about what you like in an act. Someone who's got a clear, you spoke earlier about having a recognizable voice, but I thought something that was very important you said was someone who's got a clear idea of what they want to say and what they want to sound like and who they are as an artist. That's a key takeaway, I think, from what you've been telling us here. But what other advice would you give to songwriters with regards to writing songs?
Oh, I think you should always try and say things lyrically that you would say in a colloquial manner. So use everyday expressions.
Yeah.
And always take notes. Always be aware of conversations that are going around you, and ask yourself when you've written a lyric, would I actually say that? Okay. In everyday conversation. And half the time you find yourself, no, I wouldn't say that, because you've flowered it up into something which is reads well, but actually I constantly, when I'm writing with Claudia Brooken, who I write with for 2 days every week, we do it every week, week in, week out. Right. She turns up at 11 o'clock and leaves at 6, and we just immerse ourselves into John and Claudia's world and we just constantly ask questions. Does that sing right? Does it flow? Does the rhyme? What's the rhyming scheme here? Should we change the rhyming scheme from the verse to the chorus? Every word is really scrutinized, and don't ever take, just because you think you finished it, that it's finished. So I'm constantly, when I make a demo recording for Claudia or anybody I'm writing with, I might make 4 or 5 different versions of it in different keys, different tempos, just trying to work out what is the best chassis for it, just the best way to build your end. You've got your chassis, then you put in the engine and the seats and the steering wheel and just the aircon and all that kind of stuff, the sat nav. But before you put that in, you've got to have the right framework for it. Yeah. So that I spend more time on the framework than anything else.
Yeah, sure.
And everything else is detail, and it's easy, the rest, but it's getting the basis right.
Yeah, good point. So if you could have written any song, I asked this of all my guests, if there was a song which you wish you could have written, that you'd had that experience of being able to change the chassis for, and have the experience of it coming through you, what song, not of your own, would you wish you could have written?
Oh, I think probably quite a few Jimmy Webb songs.
Yeah.
The Highwayman, Jimmy Webb, is a song which George Martin produced, is one of the great records of all time in my book.
Right.
And one of the great lyrics, and I love that record. So I sometimes and what else? A Ray Davies song, perhaps, Waterloo Sunset.
I heard that last night, actually, and just reminded how beautiful that song is.
So songs, as you say, they're beautiful things, and I like a song that makes me feel emotional. I was listening to the Claudia Brücken album I produced with her in 2013. And I listened to this song called "I Want You," which you should check out on Spotify.
Yeah.
It almost brought me to tears. It's such an emotional experience listening to it. So I like songs that can make you feel something.
Yeah.
Make you feel alive.
Fantastic. John, so where can people find you online and your songs, and where you are?
Well, so on Spotify, you can find me on the John Williams Syndicate, and you can find there's a playlist, and there's lots of info about the songs I've uploaded over the last couple of years. You can hear Ex Propaganda. You can hear Petula Clark, Lost in You album, and From Now On, and the John Williams Syndicate, and the East Side Band will be available on Spotify September the 1st. Fantastic. So it's in my old age, I'm getting all my acts together finally.
Well done. Thank you very much, John. Thank you for being my guest today. I really appreciate your time and your insight. And everybody listening, go and check out John's work. It's really, really great. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.